Psalms 1:1, where it says, how happy is the one who does not walk in the advice of the wicked. And then Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, dwell on these things.
Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Wisdom is Wealth. Wisdom is Wealth is designed to give you guys practical insights, modern strategies, and even timeless philosophies around gaining wisdom in your life. The wiser we get, the wealthier we will become. This podcast really is inspired by the book of Proverbs in the Bible, which was written by King Solomon, who prayed to God for wisdom, and as a byproduct became the wealthiest person to ever live. If he was still alive today in present day, he'd be worth $1.3 trillion with a T. Not because he prayed for wealth, but he prayed to God to give him wisdom. And as he grew wiser, as a byproduct, he grew wealthier, particularly financially, but not just stopping there, in every facet of his life. And in my own life, I have realized that the wealthier I become, it's truthfully just because I have become wiser in life. I'm gonna bring on guests that are incredibly successful, incredibly amazing human beings, and have an amazing financial wealth that they've grown for themselves. And they're gonna share wisdom on their life experience in totality in hopes that something becomes valuable for you to implement in your process, in your life, and in your journey, and see how wisdom truthfully is wealth.
Welcome back to another episode of Wisdom is Wealth. Today's episode is called A Biblical Approach to the Stock Market. And three of my most popular episodes all have to do with the stock market and or investing. And so I'm going to definitely highly recommend that you listen to this episode first before you go and listen to those ones, which I'll tell you the names of them here in a second if you haven't listened to them yet. If you have, I would just highly recommend now revisiting them after hearing this one first. But what I'm saying is, whether you listen to these other episodes or not that I'm going to list off here in a second, or whether you've listened to them or not, this one today is going to be like the precursor. I believe it should come first before you listen to those ones. But if you've already listened to those ones, because this one wasn't available first, then listen to this one and go back to those ones at a different time. And those two other episodes that I'm talking about, number one is Understanding the Stock Market, and then I have another one that's called Understanding the Stock Market 2.0, where we go over like the basics of the stock market, right? Because how could you fully best understand the overall concept of the stock market and make the best of it if you don't understand the basics? The answer is you probably won't. You probably won't make the best of the stock market. That's a lot of people are walking around confused and delaying quality investments due to that confusion. And so those episodes really clear up the basics. They really address the basics to clear up the confusion. And so, but today's episode is more important than that because again, it's called A Biblical Approach to the Stock Market. So making sure that we're not only eliminating confusion around the stock market, but when we are acting on it, we're acting on it in a biblically sound way. And then my third episode that I was referencing in the beginning of this is called Investment Advice from Jesus. And that basically breaks down the parable of the talents, which we'll talk a little bit about here today. But I really do believe that you guys are going to benefit tremendously from this because the stock market's a popular topic in finances. It can be confusing, and it also can be very advantageous if we understand it to the best of our ability. So I want us to understand the basics, but first and foremost, start with going about it from a biblically sound way. And so if you couldn't guess, today we're talking about investing in the stock market from a biblical perspective, because somewhere along the way, I find that many Christians were taught one of two extremes. They either wealth building is evil and investing is worldly, or like I hear it all the time, like the stock market's gambling, like Christians shouldn't do it. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. Actually, I know that's not true, right? Just about how we go about it. So I either wealth building's evil and investing is worldly, or money became the center of faith entirely. Both are dangerous, and the Bible does not condemn multiplication, except, in fact, actually, it talks about it a lot. And it condemns greed, idolatry, dishonesty, and misplaced trust. Like I always say in Scripture, money's never the issue. Greed is, idolatry is, misplaced faith, trust, and identity are. And investing can absolutely be done in a way that honors God. But like anything involving money, our heart posture, motives, and stewardship, they matter deeply. And so today I want to take you through 4 principles for investing in the stock market in a biblically sound way. So basically 4 things to consider when you're investing in the stock market that will help us do it in a way that's biblically sound, that glorifies God, and that reflects his character. All right. Number one is understanding that investing is for the long haul. It's not a get rich quick scheme. And so one of the biggest problems in modern investing culture is impatience. Everyone wants fast money, quick flips, massive overnight returns, but biblical wealth building is usually slow, disciplined, and intentional. And it has foresight. It understands the long game. It has patience. And so some scripture here to really show this, there's actually several pieces in the book of Proverbs. One of my favorite is Proverbs 13, verse 11, that says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. And so that verse alone right there destroys most get-rich-quick thinking. But listen though, like there are people who day trade successfully. So if you don't know what day trading is, it's like you're actively trading in the stock market each day, which can make you faster and larger returns than what I'm talking about here, which is just conventional investing, right? Having a portion of your paycheck or a certain amount each month come out automatically and go into a retirement account, a brokerage account, and you kind of just set it and forget it, right? And so I'm not saying that there aren't opportunities to make faster and larger sums in the stock market, particularly through day trading. There are advanced strategies out there, but that's not what I'm teaching today, and I'm probably not the guy to teach those strategies anyways. What I'm talking about is long-term investing, consistent investing, patient investing, and patient does also not mean passive, all right? So yes, we want to be wise, have patience, understand the long term, but I'm also not saying do nothing. I'm also not saying be overly conservative out of fear and scarcity and false holiness, that being poor and moving as slow as you possibly can and struggling as much as you possibly can, right? Is biblically sound, right? And so I'm not saying you got to make a penny a day, right? And you don't have to take 1,000 years just to make $100 in the stock market, right? I am saying that wisdom balances risk and reward responsibly, all right? And so again, just because I'm saying be patient, it doesn't mean be passive. It does not mean be ultra conservative to the point where your money barely grows, right? That's also not wise. And so simply put, the goal is not gambling. The goal is stewardship. The stock market should not feel like a casino. It should feel like planting seeds, right? You plant, you water, you wait, you compound, and over time, growth happens. So my first point here to go into the stock market in a biblically sound way is understanding the stock market is for the long haul, 10, 20, 30, even longer than that, types of years, multiple decades, where if invested correctly and consistently and you show patience and wisdom, you will make large amounts of money over long periods of time. All right. And so understand the long game of the stock market. That's point number one. And pointed out a scripture from Proverbs to be able to prove that, if you will, support that. And there's many other pieces of scripture that do support that as well. But as we move on to point number two, which is don't invest in companies that oppose your values, right? Like there's a lot of companies out there. Yeah, like maybe the returns are great, the opportunity's there, but like you shouldn't pick returns over values. And so simply put, every time that you invest money into a business, right, stocks are just ownerships in business given to you in the forms of shares, right? That's what they're called, shares. When you invest in stocks, you're investing into businesses. And what does that mean? You're giving them money. You're giving them resources to forward their mission. And so this is often an uncomfortable conversation for some people, but it does matter, because when you invest in a company, you are financially supporting that business and its mission. And that means you should care about what types of companies you're investing in. And now I'm definitely not trying to get political here, and this is not about perfection either. It's about intentionality. And so just some supporting scripture as we read Psalms 1:1, where it says, "How happy is the one who does not walk in the advice of the wicked." And then Philippians 4:8 says, "Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, dwell on these things." And so you should ask, right? Does this company's mission align with biblical values? Would I feel comfortable directly partnering with this company? Because that's kind of what you're doing when you're investing in it, right? And am I helping fund something that opposes God's design? Again, this is not about legalism. It's about stewardship and discernment. Your investments, simply put, should reflect your convictions, not your appetite for returns. All right, so that's point number two here, all right? Don't invest in companies that oppose your values. Number one, be in it for the long haul, right? Understand the long-term payoff of the stock market. Number 2, don't invest in companies that oppose your values. And then point number 3, think generationally, not just this lifetime, not just retirement. So think generationally, not just retirement. Most people invest with one goal. Someday, hopefully retire comfortably. Someday have a little bit of money to last them in between retirement and when they pass away. But biblically, wealth is bigger than retirement. It's about legacy. And we see that in Proverbs 13:22, where King Solomon, the author of Proverbs, says a good person leaves an inheritance to their grandchildren. That is generational thinking. And so an inheritance also is just not money. It's wisdom, it's stability, it's opportunity, it's breaking financial chaos off of your family line. And God's design is not just survival, it is stewardship that blesses future generations. And so I often say to people like, yeah, please leave, if you can, a financial sum to the next generation, but also, and probably most importantly, leave them a healthy relationship with money. Leave them a biblically sound relationship with money. Leave them good habits, good stewardship when it comes to money. Allow them to see that with how you steward your finances. Allow them to build a healthy relationship with money. Allow them to understand what biblical finances actually look like. And then also leaving them an inheritance of financial resources to now steward with that relationship, that internal conviction, and ultimately that beautiful relationship with finances, where they can steward money in a way that is reflective of God's character, in a way that grows his kingdom, and in a way that ultimately aligns with his design. And so when you think long term, right, you have to make wise decisions today. You got to stop living only for immediate gratification, and you stop treating money emotionally, and you start building intentionally. And I often sit down with a lot of people that are planning for retirement, and oftentimes with what they're doing or even their goals, it's only going to be enough money for them to hopefully last and live off of that money, probably fairly conservative as well, between when they retire and when they pass away. And I often ask them I pose the question to them, like, no judgment whatsoever, like no matter what your answer is here, but like, do you want to leave money to your kids, to the next generation, right? And it does open up their eyes a decent bit. I think oftentimes people just don't think that it's possible, but the earlier we start not even thinking that it's possible, but planning to make it possible, the better. And so I just would say, think generationally here when you're thinking about the stock market. Don't just think for retirement, think for generations to come. And again, Proverbs 13:22 says a good person leaves an inheritance to their grandchildren. And yes, when you dive into the biblical translation of this verse, the best inheritance you can leave your children is a beautiful relationship with the Lord, right? Knowing Jesus Christ. But it does not exclude the other proven meanings of this piece of scripture, which is financially related, which is asset related. And so we don't need to live in an or world where like it's either this scripture either means a good relationship with the Lord or it means money. It means both here, right? Avoidance and idolatry both were never the point of money in scripture, right? What I mean by that is like, yes, God warns against idolatry of money, but he also doesn't tell us to go out and avoid it. The answer is stewardship. And so oftentimes people, unfortunately, they read these scriptures and they try to distort it or manipulate it in a way to just mean what they want it to mean, right? Where yes, it does mean to leave a beautiful inheritance of a good relationship and understanding of Jesus Christ to the next generations, but it also does have a financial implication to this verse. Just because that makes us uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that we should exclude it. That's heresy, right? And so we want to make sure that we're fully understanding what these scriptures mean, not making them mean what we want them to mean, and ultimately, even when they're challenging us, step up and do our best to be obedient and surrender to the Lord and walking in a way that we will play these scriptures out to hopefully glorify him. All right. And so if this intimidates you, right, it makes you a little scared, or if it excites you, right, maybe a little bit of both, like it does to me when I hear stuff like this, I just want to, offer you guys, like, I'm here to help. This is exactly what my company does. This is exactly what our program, the Good Steward program, does. We teach you how to manage your money based off of biblical wisdom without all of the outdated, fearful, and restrictive feelings finances usually brings on people. And we really pride ourselves on sound theological teachings, really understanding what the scriptures are saying, and ultimately doing our best to walk those out in our everyday life, particularly when it comes to the stewardship of the financial resources that the Lord has entrusted us with. And so you could use the link in the show description to book a free consultation with one of my team members. It's an extremely safe healthy, amazing, and exciting conversation. And we'd be absolutely honored to speak with you to see how we can help you. And if the Good Steward program is a fit for you, we'll show you exactly how to move forward with it. So in the next year or so, you don't have to be in the same spot with the same stresses. What if in a year from now, you were in the best financial situation that you've ever been in? And I know that little mustard seed of doubt from the enemy right now in your mind is trying to convince you that it's not possible. But I promise you, it is. So take the next obedient step. Click the link in the show description and we'll be happy to chat with you. And so I think that'll really help be a great segue here to point number 4, which is God expects multiplication, not just preservation. And so this is motivation for y'all to invest in a wise way, take calculated risk, and not just hoard your money out of fear, not to continue to let fear operate not just your finances, but your life in totality. And I think this is a big one because somewhere along the way, many Christians started believing that multiplication and stewardship are optional, right? That preserving what we have is enough, and it's not what Jesus taught. Particularly when you look at the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, right? In this parable, what happens is a master goes on vacation. This is Jesus telling this story. A master goes on vacation and he gives servant number 1 5 talents, servant number 2 2 talents, and servant number 1 talent. He goes on a vacation and he comes back and he asks for those talents back. And talents were their form of currency back in the day. That was their money. And so when he comes back from vacation, servant number 1 walks up to him and says, "Master, I doubled your money. I took your money and I invested it out of faith. I made wise decisions and I doubled your money." And he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Servant number 2 walks up to him and says the same exact thing. And his response is the same to this servant. "Well done, good and faithful servant." And here's the point of the whole thing. Servant number 3 walks up to him and only gives him back the 1 talent that he was given when the master left and said, "Master, I buried your talent out of fear because I was scared of losing the money." And he rebukes him and he says, "You wicked and lazy servant." And not only that, he takes the talent from him and he gives it to the one that earns the most. And it's pretty clear what's going on here, right? The Lord, he values multiplication and not preservation out of fear, but multiplication out of faith. And this is the episode that I talked about earlier, investment advice from Jesus. Definitely put that on one of your future episodes to listen from because we really go deep into this scripture. And so the teaching point here is just God expects faithful stewardship, and faithful stewardship includes multiplication, right? Multiplication and stewardship are not optional in scripture. And so we're not talking about greed. I'm not talking about obsession. I'm not talking about idolatry. I'm talking about multiplication. Why? Because increase creates impact. Increase creates opportunity. Increase creates generosity, and increase creates capacity. Money is a tool, and good stewards multiply tools to create more good. And fear-based preservation, it's not biblical stewardship. Wise multiplication is. And so I'll just, ask you guys, is fear driving your finances right now? If so, then we want to realign with the Lord, right? Ask him, "Lord, take fear out of the driver's seat and put faith in it. Allow me to continue to pursue you and what you have for my life in totality, specifically my finances. How do I start to steward my finances in a way that honors you, that reflects your character?" And I often tell people, God's character, when Jesus here on earth, he wasn't a God of fear, right? And so if we're called to do things that are reflective of Jesus's character, then ask yourself, am I managing my money in a way that's reflective of Jesus's character? And if fear is in the driver's seat, fear is involved, then the answer is probably no. And that's no judgment whatsoever, just an invitation back into alignment. And so I hope that this is helping you guys see clearly with your finances, I think in general, but specifically when it comes to investing in the stock market. And so what I'm trying to say here, though, before I wrap this point up, is this does not mean reckless risk, right? This does not mean chasing wealth, and this does not mean your value comes from net worth. It means we're called to faithfully grow what God places in our hand, and wise investments is a great way to do that. And fearful avoidance and hoarding and burying and living in lack is not. And so investing biblically is not about chasing money. It's about stewarding wisely. It means thinking long-term, staying aligned with your values, building generational wealth, and multiplying faithfully. Money is not the goal. God is, right? Being an image bearer of him here on earth is. But stewardship matters, and multiplication done God's way can be a powerful tool for peace, provision, generosity, legacy, and kingdom building. And so again, if you want help stewarding your finances holistically from a biblical perspective, not just around investing, but everything that goes into your money, I want to invite you to book a free consultation for the Good Steward program. The link is in the show description. And in the program, we help people build biblical financial foundations, get clarity around their systems, right? That are just simple but easy and create amazing results. We help them eliminate debt in the most biblically sound way possible, invest wisely, grow wealth responsibly, and ultimately steward money in alignment with God's design. If that sounds like something you need, then click the link in the show description, book your free consultation, and we'd be absolutely honored to chat with you. And so lastly here, wisdom is not just about making money. It's about managing money in a way that honors God, creates peace, and builds lasting impact. And that is how wisdom becomes wealth. And so I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode called A Biblical Approach to the Stock Market. Right? Make sure you guys book your free consultation for the Good Steward program. I know a lot of you have been listening for a while, and there's actually a lot of you that have been booking them, which are awesome. We have been loving chatting with y'all, and some of them some of you have been great fits for the Good Steward program. And then ultimately go back to the other episodes I referenced here, right? I think it's called the stock market, basics of the stock market. I think I said it correctly in the beginning of the episode. And then there's also the 2.0 as well around that episode. And then also investment advice from Jesus. And so I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you know somebody that would benefit from this episode, maybe you've been talking to somebody about investing, a little bit confusing, someone can be a little bit misled or stuck, or maybe even a little overzealous when it comes to the topic, share this episode with them. Let the Lord speak to them through this episode. And depending on the platform that you're listening on, I'd be super appreciative if you liked, download, subscribe, commented, and if you could leave us a 5-star review. That helps us tremendously because we have a lot of people searching different types of podcasts around finances and biblical perspectives, and those reviews really help them not just land on this podcast, but listen to it and hopefully hear from the Lord as a result of that. So I love y'all. Go have a great day. We'll see you in the next episode.